Today we have a review of something that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. It's the 1971 Clint Eastwood movie Dirty Harry in 4K. Now, I don't have that much to say about the packaging of this standard edition, but it is a little bit disappointing. I think they're trying to pander to maybe a younger audience who, when they walk into a store like HMV, say, "Oh, is that a new film, or is that a film that's actually 54 years old?" It just looks as if someone very junior has done their best in Photoshop to make this look like a modern film. But I think they really have missed a trick by not going for a more vintage cover. In particular because movie fans now seem to be obsessed with the 1970s. That's because it really was a spectacular time for motion pictures in America, and a lot of risks were being taken. A lot of directors were being given free rein because the studios were desperate to get back the audiences that they lost to television. I also think it's the last time that American cinema was art as well as entertainment, and the final nail in the coffin, I think, comes with Apocalypse Now in 1979. Now, the Steelbook and the special edition of this movie have far more interesting and far better designed covers, and they are based on old posters, but they cost a hell of a lot. The Steelbook on its own costs £29.99 here in the UK, and the special super duper edition with posters and things like that I'm not really bothered about costs £44.99. When it comes to the quality of this transfer, I'm not going to make you wait for my verdict. It is excellent. It's probably one of the best 1970s movies that has been transferred to 4K so far. And in particular, I have noticed with 1970s movies, they seem to just lend themselves really well to a 4K transfer. Lots of advances in lens technology were being made at this time, and also film stocks were getting faster and better. There is film grain, but it doesn't in any way spoil your enjoyment. I like film to look like film. I don't like it to look like video with too much digital noise reduction. Throughout the film, the colours are rich and vibrant, the blacks are black, and the highlights aren't blown out. There's only one brief moment in the film, and that's in a nightclub when everything is washed in red light, that for a moment or two the image tends to look a bit like video, but apart from that, the rest of the film is superb. The director of photography on this film was Bruce Surtees, who not only worked a lot with Clint Eastwood but also Don Siegel. And the start of this film is particularly impressive when we see the broad San Francisco skyline with the Golden Gate Bridge, etc. in broad daylight. It really is a stunning opening to this film. But as we move into the film, it does get very dark, not only in terms of subject matter, but just in terms of the visuals. There are lots of dark, moody scenes in this film where sometimes somebody's only lit by one street light. So I'd say to get the best out of viewing this film, you really need to watch it either in a darkened room or with a very bright television or with the curtains closed. Bruce Surtees really was taking a lot of risks with this. We don't see any of the standard sort of day for night cinematography which was prevalent in television shows and movies of the time, whereby they'd shoot in daylight with a filter and then make it look a bit darker afterwards in post. When it comes to the plot of the movie, Clint Eastwood's character is chasing a serial killer around San Francisco. Now, the serial killer is called Scorpio, and it's a very thinly veiled reference to the Zodiac killings which had been happening in America at that time. And this killer doesn't seem to care who he actually kills. He's just on some kind of killing spree in order to extort money from the city of San Francisco. Now, given that this film is 54 years old, if you're looking for political correctness, I'm afraid you're going to be sadly disappointed. There's no attempt here to find out why the killer is the way he is, his background, his childhood, anything like that. This guy just needs to be caught and stopped as far as Dirty Harry is concerned. Andy Robinson's performance as the crazed Scorpio killer is absolutely fantastic. Some people think it's over the top, but I don't think it is. It has the exact desired effect. You absolutely hate this guy, and you want Harry to find him and stop him at any cost. There was a particular zeitgeist at the time in law enforcement and in the way the older generation viewed criminals, whereby it was thought that the criminals were just getting away with too much and that the law was sliding to be in favour of the criminal. However, it also needs to be said that at this time, police corruption in big cities like San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, and indeed London and so forth here in the UK was pretty awful, and there were many miscarriages of justice. But no matter where you stand on the political spectrum, whether that's in 1971 or today, it can't be denied that Dirty Harry is a very impressive and very important film. So to get the best out of this movie, if you've never seen it before, I think you really need to just look at it as a sort of cathartic adventure movie with a good guy and a bad guy, a bit like a western set in a city. So don't look for any kind of subtle metaphors or nuances because you're simply not going to find them. When it comes to Clint Eastwood's performance as Dirty Harry, I really don't think anybody else could have played the part any better at that time. And in fact, I was really shocked to find out that this role was initially given to Frank Sinatra, who I think would have been really terrible in this role. And we certainly wouldn't have been talking about this film in such venerated terms 54 years later. Now, I wouldn't say that Clint Eastwood is one of my favourite actors, but I would say that he is definitely one of my favourite movie stars. And there really is a difference between a movie star and an actor. As far as I'm concerned, an actor is someone who's a bit of a chameleon. Their character changes from film to film. Clint Eastwood doesn't have to do any of that. He just turns up and does his thing. And that's what makes him a true movie star. Having said that, he does a lot of clever things in his performances that people wouldn't even notice because he is so aware of what the camera can do for him. And let's not forget, Clint Eastwood has been directing movies now for about 55 years, so he really does know a thing or two. And I think his catalogue will stand up for years and be really appreciated when he's gone. Now, lots of people seem to think that the Cop on the Edge movie started with Dirty Harry in the 1970s. However, its roots go back a lot further, as way back as the 1940s and film noir. And I think where the Cop on the Edge movie really starts to come into its own is with Steve McQueen's Bullitt in 1968. However, Dirty Harry was so huge and so controversial that it made a massive mark, and the Cop on the Edge movie pretty much became a staple of American cinema for about the next 20 or 30 years. The director of this film is Don Siegel, and he's one of my favourite action directors of all time. He directed things like Lee Marvin's version of The Killers, Charlie Varick, which is another of my absolute favourite 1970s movies, and of course one of the greatest sci-fi movies of the 1950s, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. He seems to be very good at just directing down and dirty action and making it very visceral. And when it comes to violence, and in particular the killings in this film, I have to say it hasn't lost any of its potency in 54 years. If you're a younger person and you're watching this film for the first time, some of it really still is quite disturbing. Right from the very first moments of this film, when we see the first victim killed just before the credits roll, we know that we've reached a watershed moment in terms of violence and we are no longer in the 1960s. The soundtrack is by the amazing Lalo Schifrin, most famous for Mission Impossible, but let's not forget he also did the soundtrack for Bullitt. And it really is a fantastic soundtrack, really highlighting the action, the tension and the threat in this film. Another great thing about this standard edition is that it has over 4 hours of extras, and that's really good to see, in particular when it comes to standard editions, which are often lacking those. So if, like me, you're a huge fan of 1970s cinema, then you must own Dirty Harry. Not just because this is a stunning 4K transfer and the film has never looked better, but also because this is an important American film, not only in the cop genre, but in any genre. But just before I go, I have a confession to make, and that is that Dirty Harry isn't necessarily my favourite Dirty Harry movie in the series. My favourite is in fact Magnum Force, and as you might be able to see, I've just got the corner of the Magnum Force poster just behind me on my wall, and it's one of my treasured movie possessions. And there are some really great and very chilling performances from people like David Soul and Hal Holbrook. But that's for another video, and I'm sure that Magnum Force, along with the rest of the Dirty Harry movies, will be released very soon on 4K, and I'm really looking forward to that. That's it for this video, but I'd like to know your thoughts in the comments down below about 1970s American cinema, in particular when it comes to down and dirty, gritty thrillers. And I'll see you in the next one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.